My first question, tell me your first and last name and how to spell it.
Yep, Jennifer Shaw, JennifirShaw.
In your position and where you work.
I work at Shaw Law Group. I'm a principal at Shaw Law Group.
Would it be okay if I titled you as employment attorney?
Yes, that's perfect.
Okay. So my first question is easy. What is the Family First Coronavirus Response Act?
So this is a federal law that was passed by Congress to provide some relief to employees during the pandemic. And it applies to employers who have fewer than 500 employees in the country.
And what do they get out of this act?
Okay, so there are two main provisions that apply to the workplace. And one of the things to sort of think about is let me back up and try to make this make sense. So the act is related to time off that employees may be entitled to for one of two reasons. There's what we call the emergency sick leave provision, which allows them to take time off if they're diagnosed with COVID, they're subject to a quarantine, they're taking care of a family member who has been diagnosed. There are 6 reasons that they can take time off for the sick leave. The other part of it is what we call temporary childcare, FMLA, and that is the provision that applies for employees who need to take time off to care for their children because they can't go to daycare or their schools are closed or they're doing remote learning.
And so if you fall into the category where you're a parent having to care for your child, how much time do you get off? Are you still going to get paid? What can they expect?
Great question. Yes, so you're going to get up to 12 weeks off. And the reason it's 12 weeks is because the Family and Medical Leave Act, which is the federal law that allows employees, if their employer has 50 or more employees within a 75-mile radius, they get to take time off to care for themselves, to care for a family member, or to bond with a new child. With Families First, that the reach of the law has been expanded. The employer doesn't have to have 50 or more employees. And the employee does not have to have worked for a year, which is what's required by the FMLA. They just have to work for 30 days. And then for that employer, and they will get 12 weeks of leave. It can be taken on an intermittent basis. So it might be that mom can be home 2 days a week, dad can be home for 3 days a week, and vice versa. They can take it intermittently, but it's 12 weeks at their regular schedule. And then in terms of pay, they are paid 2/3 of their regular rate of pay. And there are specific ways that that rate is going to be calculated depending on whether the employee has a set schedule or they work a variable schedule.
And how can a family apply for this?
So all of the employers are required to give a notice to their employees of the provisions of the act. So all the employee has to do, again, providing that they work for an employer with fewer than 500 employees, they're just going to go to their HR department, personnel, management, who runs the company and say, listen, I need this time off.
And so, just so I make sure I have it right, if your employer has less than 50 people, you don't qualify for this.
No, sorry. If they have 500 or more employees, you don't qualify. If they have fewer than 500, you qualify.
500 or more, you don't.
Right.
50 or less, you do.
No, get rid of the 50.
Oh, okay, 50.
Fewer than 500. Fewer than 500. Yeah, the 50 employees matters for the regular FMLA, but
Okay.
that has been, that is not a requirement of Families First.
So if you have 500 or more employees, you can't qualify for this.
Right, and the reason is what Congress said was, we think those larger employers are probably going to have special benefit programs themselves. Now, there are some exceptions. For example, folks who work in the food sector, they might work for grocery stores, restaurants. They're going to be eligible for certain benefits, even if their employer has more than 500 employees. That's an executive order that Governor Newsom issued a few months ago. So there are some provisions, and of course, the California legislature is looking at some pending legislation right now to try to determine if they should expand or to extend this right to more than just folks who work for an employer with fewer than 500 employees.
And my next question, what if Is this only qualified for people who has to go back into the office? If you're still working from home, can you still benefit from this?
Yes, if you're teleworking, you are still eligible for the leave, and you're still eligible for the temporary child care FMLA as long as you meet all the requirements. Now, here's the key, Monica, that's really important. If somebody has been laid off, for example, or they're furloughed, they're not going to be eligible for Families First because they're not working. But they have to be working, whether it's teleworking or at home or in the regular office or the regular website.
Does your spouse have to apply separately? Or, for example, say if I was married, can I apply for me and my spouse? Or does he need to apply because he works at Dell and I work at Microsoft? You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah, you have to do it individually. So you're not applying to the government, you're applying to your workplace. So you would apply to your workplace, your husband would apply to his workplace. Now remember, where the government gets involved is they're giving a tax credit to the employers who give this time off. So the employer will provide information to the IRS and they'll get a credit on their quarterly payroll taxes. So it doesn't really cost the employer out-of-pocket money. It's just a credit to them on their payroll taxes.
And when do you get paid? Is it bi-weekly you'll get your payments, or what can someone expect when it comes to getting that financial?
They get paid on their regular paydays. So whatever their regular paydays are. Some employees are paid weekly, some employees are paid twice a month, bi-weekly. So whatever their regular pay period is, that's when they're going to get their money.
And if you need more than 12 weeks, for example, the school year is a whole year.
Yes.
What's the option for parents?
Well, there isn't one right now, just to be perfectly blunt. And because the coronavirus is lasting a lot longer than anybody hoped, keep in mind, many people use their 12 weeks for the last school year, right? So some people are coming into this current school year without any leave. Now, what we're encouraging our clients to do is say, look, let's be flexible. Maybe you can work super early in the morning, do school with your kids, and then work in the afternoon. Let's try to be open to different ideas, different scheduling, flexible work hours to try to accommodate these parents, grandparents, aunts, uncles, folks who are caring for these children.
Yeah, because that was my next question. If you already have used this and now
then you're out of luck. Now, Congress may make some changes. I mean, they haven't been too effective lately, so
right.
Who knows? They may make some changes and the California legislature may do something. But for now, it's a really difficult situation for these folks, whether it's because they're out of their 80 hours of sick leave, which is that federal emergency paid sick leave, or they're out of their 12 weeks of this temporary child care FMLA. It's tough. And so we're telling employers, look, COVID-19 will go away at some point. You want to keep your best talent, your best employees, do what you can to work with them. And, you know, I've been saying this whole crisis, people need to have a little grace when it comes to what the rest of us are going through, right? You know, the employer is worried about their business, understandably, appropriately. The employee is worried about taking care of their family, understandably, appropriately. We got to come together to try to find a solution. The government is probably not going to work this out.
And my last question, what, in a nutshell, when it comes to the Family First Coronavirus Response Act, what do you think parents need to know today so that they can get on this as soon as possible? Because how long does it even take to apply and get your benefits and get the time off?
So here's the good news. This isn't a government program, so there's no waiting period, there's no delay. All your viewers have to do is go to their employer and say, listen, as you probably figured out, all the schools are closed at this point. I need some help with how to take care of my child. Can you please let me know what my benefits are? Like I said, there's a poster that they should have, and every workplace needs to be able to deal with this leave. One of the things we've been doing to try to help employers is we have a weekly webinar where we try to let them know, look, these are the things you need to be doing. A lot of employers still don't understand what their obligations are. So if one of your viewers goes to the employer and the employer says, I don't have any idea what you're talking about, all right, they need to get online. And if they go to the Department of Labor's website, which is www.dol.gov, they have all sorts of questions and answers about the Families First Coronavirus Response Act. They can show those to their employer, and then the employer will understand what it needs to do.
And if you don't know the answer to this one, it's okay. What, as your professional advice as an attorney, what do you advise for people who work at a 500 plus office and don't
Yes.
qualify for this? What should they do?
So anybody who doesn't qualify for the Families First benefits should go to their company or their employer anyway and say, listen, I need some flexibility. What can you do here? I'm a good employee. I've got a good record. I need you to help me be flexible. People are going to have to think outside of the box. Now, some employers are not going to do it, and then the employee has a choice to make. But in my experience, most employers have worked really hard to try to accommodate their employees. Sometimes employers need to be encouraged to think a little more broadly. They may be used to, but you work 8 to 5. Well, I can't work 8 to 5 because my daughter's Zoom calls are from 9 to 1. So could I work a little in the morning and a little in the evening? So what I want the employer and the employee to do is have this dialogue where they're talking to each other and they work together to find a solution. Some people have grandmas or aunts or uncles or close family friends who can help out. Some people don't. All they have is themselves and their child. So the employers need to be as open and sort of willing to try to meet that employee where the employee is, right? That's the most important thing. Our economy has suffered enough right now. We don't need more people on the unemployment rolls and more people who don't have access to care for their family. So what we really need are employees and employers who can work together and try to come up with a solution for each individual situation.
And is this only for as long as the pandemic is happening, or is there a cutoff when people can't apply for this?
Yes. Currently, the law is only valid through 12/31 of 2020. Now, I would hope that Congress would expand that considering what's going on in our country right now, but I can't predict that. At this point, they're all on recess, so who knows?
This is really only good for this school year.
Well, it's really only good for the fall semester.
Yeah, excuse me, the fall semester. Yeah,
that's right.
For the fall semester.
That's correct.
Spring semester, we may be
looking at something else.
Something else.
And here's the good news. Even if the federal government doesn't get it together to extend this law, the California legislature is working very hard to try to create some benefit programs for employees. So I fully expect when the governor has bills presented to him for signature, that there will be some bills to help with these issues. That won't happen. Well, the governor could sign legislation early and make an emergency legislation that would be effective immediately. Regular bills won't be signed till mid-October, and they'll be effective January 1. But if it's what's called urgency legislation, then it could be effective immediately. So I do think the legislature is working hard to try to come up with some solutions, both for the under 500 employees and for the over 500.
How do you prove to your employer that you have a child who you need to care for? Do you need to bring in people?
It's a great question. The employer isn't allowed to ask for a lot of documentation. There's a minimum amount of documentation that is required for the tax credit, and that is actually outlined on the IRS website. There are some regulations that have been issued by the Department of Treasury to give employers an idea of what they can ask for. But basically, when it comes to school, for example, you just have to show that your child's school is closed or the daycare center is closed or is doing distance learning where you need to be at home. There are some other requirements, like you need to be the only person who's available to care for that child. So that's why a lot of caregivers are splitting time. So they may have, mom or dad may be home for half the week. The other parent may be home the other half of the week. There are some ways to look at that, but there's not a lot of hoops that employees have to jump through.
So you have to prove two things: that your child is not distance or is distance learning, and you're the only one available to care for that child during that time that they're distance learning.
Correct.
Okay. Is there anything else that I didn't ask that you think people need to know about Families First Coronavirus Response Act that I didn't ask you?
No, the only thing that I think I want to say just for employees is to try to be patient with their employers. Some employers may not understand what their obligations are, so they may need to go back and have a conversation. And rather than getting upset and jeopardizing their job, I really want to encourage people to take a deep breath, go get the information they need to educate their employer. What's important is for that parent to be able to keep their job so that they can take care of their family. So I don't want the employee to do anything to jeopardize that.
And why wouldn't an employer know about this? Why is this something that you would have to educate your employer on?
Well, because here's what happened. There's so much going on right now because of coronavirus. A lot of people are just struggling to stay open. I mean, think about all the businesses that have closed, all the people have been laid off. So certainly this should have been something that people were aware of back in May. But, you know, keep in mind, this could be a small employer with 6 employees. We're not talking about a big company with an HR department necessarily. So a lot of the smaller employers just don't even have any access to where they would get that information.
That makes sense. And I think that's they're just trying to stay afloat.
Yeah, you know, we're all just trying to get it done.